afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Other Minds and Hands. My name is Corey Olsen, the Tolkien professor, joined as always by Maggie Parke, and here we are returning today to Pride and Prejudice. So today we want to try to map out the rest of episode 1. In particular, we wanted to sit down with the actual analysis that we want to do for our little case study, the kind of the meatier portion. So the idea, right, was that this is well, actually, hang on a second. Wait, I forget. Before we jump into things.
Oh, like announcements first?
Announcements
It's been a while.
first. Yeah,
Got
it's
anything?
been a while.
Okay.
Yeah. It's been a while. So the first thing I was thinking of announcing is just to, so I just came home from Australia.
Welcome home.
We had
Mate.
Osmoot down in Canberra, Australia, which was fantastic. And while we were down there, we were talking about next year's Osmoot, which is not going to be Osmoot because it's going to be in New Zealand. It's going to be Kiwi Moot. And I am really excited about Kiwi Moot. So Kiwi Moot, we're doing our regular moot. So Osmoot has always been a 3-day moot. And we're still going to do the same 3-day moot. So we're going to do a 3-day moot in Wellington. It's going to be amazing. But also on either side of the 3-day Kiwi moot, which will be just like and just as much fun as Osmoots have always been, we're going to be doing we're going to be road tripping around New Zealand together. And these are optional experiences. Like, not everybody who signs up for the moot has to, is necessarily opting into the other elements. But we're going to be doing a multi-day tour of the North Island before the moot, and then about a week-long tour of the South Island after the moot. And the North Island tour is going to include we're reserving the Hobbiton set for a celebration and feast one evening, and it's going to be pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about the whole thing. So anyway, that's coming up, and I know, Maggie, that you and Ben are thinking about maybe doing some Signum Studios things there too.
Yeah, Studios is starting to make some plans because, if you're going to have that kind of crew out there in some pretty cool locations. So I don't, yeah, I'm not trying to be secretive, but know that we're thinking big,
Yeah.
and we'll see what can actually happen. But yeah, we're thinking about coming as well. And I think Ben's thinking about bringing his whole family. So bring it.
Awesome.
Let's have an adventure.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be very cool. So I'm excited. The dates of it are basically from the 1st through the 14th of February next year, 2027.
February. I did not know that. That's
Yes.
important information.
That's important information. Yes, the beginning of February, which turns out to be way better than the end of January in New Zealand for local holiday reasons, basically.
Okay.
So
Great.
Yep. Very first 2 weeks of February is when we're planning to be down there in New Zealand. There will be a limited number of tickets that we are going to be able to sell, and there will be an opportunity soon to reserve a spot. We especially, of course, need to, there's some money that we have to pay up front to make our reservation in Hobbiton, of course, and we need to make sure that we know arrangements that we're making in lots of other places. So we're going to need to do reservations in advance, but it's going to be such a great time. I am really looking forward.
Ridiculous.
Really looking forward to Kiwi Moot next year. So that is an exciting thing that's coming up, and I should have soon, perhaps on our next broadcast, I will have a link to a little survey that the Kiwi Moot planners are doing to find out from people who is wanting to come, and if they're wanting to come, what they're wanting to do, and so we are making arrangements. Anyway, so that is one really exciting thing that is coming. And so, apart from the delightful experience, as always, that Osmoot was this past last week, it is pretty fun. Thinking the very last session of Osmoot was Trudy, who is our primary host in New Zealand. She is a Wellington native who has been coming to Osmoot all since the beginning of it, flying over for Osmoot. And she's the primary organizer of the Kiwi Moot trip. And she gave a presentation on like what they were planning. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be so epic.
It's gonna be great.
This is going to be so epic. It's going to be awesome. So hoping that folks can join me. I know that New Zealand is believe me, I know that it's a long trip. I just came back from it, but
I've never gone that far that direction.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, yes, if we're gonna go, we're gonna go for at least 2 weeks, right?
yeah, it's gonna be a 2-week thing total. Now again, I would emphasize that like you don't have to commit to the whole 2-week thing. You could do like just the first half. You could do just the first half in the moot, or the moot in the second half, or whatever. I guess perhaps theoretically you could just come for like, the second trip and skip the first half and the moot or whatever. I don't know, but there will be some kind of different options there. But in any
Pretty
case,
epic.
it's gonna be epic. It's gonna be great fun. All right, well let's jump back into Pride and Prejudice. It's been a few weeks. I've been traveling, and then we had that wonderful conversation with Una McCormick about adaptation, about her
Delightful.
the world of written adaptation. Just that it was really interesting to hear from someone. To me, the biggest take home from the conversation with Una was really just that sense, from her experience of like the continuity essentially between like her own experience writing fan fiction and her experience, doing her professional writing. I mean, there are differences, of course. As you said, the main difference is the contract, right? Like you're contracted and licensed. Like there's a particular expectation and therefore a particular audience that you're tailoring for. But
And interesting to hear her talk about like there's a few parameters that are set into place depending on what you're working on and how you're working on it. But it was also really refreshing to just hear her say, no.
yeah,
Like I got to write the story I wanted to write, and they would tell me if there were things that I couldn't do for XYZ. But otherwise, I just did what I wanted to do, and I made a good story. Like,
yeah.
it's so refreshing.
I mean,
That's great to hear.
It really bore home the thing that we've been talking about for a while. It's one thing, but it's one thing for me to like say in the abstract, like the most important duty of an adaptation is to tell a good story, right? Like that's, I've been saying that kind of thing for a while. It's the kind of thing we've been discussing for a while, but just really hearing
But
it
isn't it
from
nice to hear it
somebody,
from a practitioner?
yes, on
Yeah.
that side, who's in that work,
Yeah.
and how it's not like that was, I don't know, like it's not even like that's some kind of like controversial take from her point of view. It's just like the most natural, obvious thing, right? Yeah, it's what it is.
And that everybody seemed fairly hands off in the process and just let her get on with it. That was really nice to hear.
Yeah, it really was. So that was
It's so great having her, and would definitely love to do a deep dive. Like if we were able to like watch a couple of scenes and talk about process, like just hearing her talk about how she kind of fleshed things out and lived in that world and fell down the rabbit hole within the gap that we know, and just exploring all those things that we've been exploring generally, she's been doing specifically. It was really fun.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was very cool. So anyway, so that was fun, but it means we've been away from Pride and Prejudice for several weeks now. So we were.
And we should say we're not here next week.
Right. We're not going to be
but
here
we
next
will
week
be
either.
here.
More travel.
We will be
Between
the
your
week
travel
after.
and my travel, we're pretty challenged. As far
I'm
as-
I'm pretty impressed with what we do manage,
Yes, it's
where
true.
we are in different parts of the globe every week.
It's
But
true.
we have to flow with it. So yeah, next week we will not be here, but we will be here the week after.
That's right. That's right.
So we're gonna plan a little bit today. Probably plan a little bit next time too, because we've been talking about Lydia and we haven't done the actual like analysis elements of Lydia.
Yeah.
And we need to do a little bit more of that like scene watching, time stamping, which we might get to today, but we'll see.
Right, because, okay, so to review the overall outline of episode 1, we had the introduction to us and what, like, this is, like, this
why we're
series
digging
is a
in.
case study in like we who we are. We care about adaptation. We're talking about adaptation, and we're wanting to help people kind of come to grips with adaptation better. And then we talked about Pride and Prejudice, what we're doing, what it is that we're covering, and why it is that we chose Pride and Prejudice. Those are the two sections that we recorded a take of in our previous episode. The third step then was to do some of the essentially like the disclaimers, like to acknowledge many of the issues, especially with the with the two adaptations in particular, things that we're not going to get a chance to talk about much in much detail later on, that we kind of want to acknowledge at the beginning so that we can not talk about them that as
Right, just
much.
to kind of say we understand one's a film, one's a miniseries. We understand one is from the 90s, one is from the 2000s. We understand one was from TV, one is for film.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And also to acknowledge the like the gaps and things between book and TV, right? Like that one was a that the book was a pop culture contemporary work of fiction in the time that it was written, and the adaptations are like the BBC adaptation for sure was a like highbrow period drama, right?
Right.
And those two things are very different from each other and in their audiences and everything else. And then of course we talk about the Joe Wright version as well, and how that kind of factors into those, because it's not.
I think we've kind of already started talking around this, but like
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's what we need to do. Like we got to talk through like what are the things we're and like we did last time, like making the actual bullet points of what we're going to say
yeah,
and get clear about that part of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Um, so that's section 3. Now in section 4 then is the simple section where we're going to go through and explain the plot beats that we're going to track. It's both how like we're trying to compare apples to apples by, instead of looking, because the shapes of the overall stories are not always going to be necessarily the same, so we wanted to choose a particular set of story beats that we think are really intrinsically important to the overall shape of that narrative in all 3 works, and which appear in all 3, right? Because with the different levels of condensing that has to occur in various ones of them, that not every scene is in every one, so we're picking, and then we're going to go through which scenes we've picked. Then in section 5, that's what we want to focus on for most of the rest of today, is we wanted to basically showcase our analysis, to sort of look at and raise. Okay, so first we want to do some actual analysis. We want to make sure that the first episode contains something other than just like introductory material, right? Because if it does nothing other than introducing, it's kind of boring, right? We want there to be some substance in episode 1. In addition, we want to use this as an opportunity to establish some vocabulary, and I don't just mean words. I mean, many of the things, of course, in our analysis, which is most helpful in trying to understand the difference between film and book, and really thinking about what's involved in the process of adaptation, is to be thinking about the different forms of storytelling, between between how you tell a story in a book and how you tell a story on film, and therefore, because that means like what kinds of choices do you have to make, that don't necessarily, like, basically kind of illustrating. We already said in section 1, right, that like a lot of people, like, one misunderstanding about adaptation is that it can be just one for one, that somehow a film and adaptation of a book is supposed to somehow be the book on film, and that's impossible. One of the things that we want to do here is kind of illustrate, what do we mean by that? Like,
Yeah.
why is that impossible exactly? Let's actually think about this a little bit more, and let's look at let's choose a very specific example of something that is being conveyed, like just a tiny little story element, and look at how does Jane Austen convey this in the text, and how do the two films convey this, and what are they conveying? So, so yes, on the one hand, we'll be looking at similarities and differences in content, but more importantly, I think, is to really emphasize the differences primarily in method, like how do you tell a story in film? How do you tell a story in a book? How does that work? And what can we learn from that so that we're prepared for the, broader, larger analysis we're going to be doing through the rest of the episodes?
And we want to try to make that as example heavy as possible, because that's the interesting stuff, right? Like, otherwise,
Yes.
this is just lesson planning. We don't want to just sit here and lecture. It's
Yes.
showing, showing, showing. So, trying to get through some of that and see, like, oh, what am I trying to talk about? Like, what are we looking at here? And how can I convey that? And then sharpening that up. So it's not just like, I don't know. I think I fall into the trap sometimes of just like brainstorming what I want to say and then reading the bullet points.
Right.
But you're missing a step of thinking about how that can be super engaging. So that's what I'm looking forward to with today, of making sure it's as visual as we possibly can be.
Right. Right.
So that means finding clips and talking about specific scenes and angles and lighting and cameras and all that kind of fun stuff. And just being able to do like a snippet of that one in episode one so people kind of get the gist if they only watch our first episode of what we do. But hopefully they're intrigued enough to carry on.
Yes. Yes. Um, yes. Okay.
Before we do that, I'm throwing one more log on the fire. Hang on.
Okay.
It's cold.
Okay.
Thank you. I also forgot to tell you that I emailed Jane Austen House for permission to use this photo, and they said sure.
Oh, lovely.
So thank you, Jane Austen House.
There we go. Thank you, Jane Austen House.
Yeah, I have to give them credit in our credits, so I said no problem.
There we go. Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to talk through.
Do you want to start with
section
the book?
3. Yeah, it's probably a good place to start. Very good
Might as well.
place.
So we already looked at these passages. So this is a bit of a review of these passages, but we can just decide exactly what we want to focus on. And one of the things that's going to be a little bit of a challenge is that we... here, let me make this bigger. Okay. One thing that's going to be a little bit of a challenge is that we're not going to have much context, right? Or thinking about how much context to give. So the first reference to Lydia comes in chapter 2.
So wait, hang on.
Yeah.
Right now we're going to skip outlining the next section so we can do the Lydia analysis right now. Yeah.
Yes, let's do the Lydia analysis right now, because
Perfectly
that's going to
fine.
be like, let's take the time that we have to do that, and then
Yep.
we'll have a bunch of like notes and ideas and thoughts, and then we can organize them more clearly, and then
I think that'll help inform section 3 and 4 too. So
Yes.
that's good.
yes.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking. Okay, so our particular case study, the idea that we had for what specific thing we want to show them, is the introduction of Lydia's character. That we chose that because it's a very specific thing, right? It's that we don't want to get into, I mean, we don't have time. This is only going to be one segment of this episode. So we don't want to spend, an hour doing detailed analysis of a whole section of stuff. We want to look at something very, very specific. And I think that Lydia is interesting because she's not a major character, but she's important to the story. And also, because of that, actually, it creates an interesting... There's an interesting specific question, essentially, that we're asking. Like, how do these... In these particular storytelling modes, how is a character who is going to play a significant role in the story introduced? This is different from the question of like, how do you introduce the protagonist? That's a really important question. But that's a bigger question. and it would be hard. Like, we could talk about the introduction of Elizabeth Bennet, but there just would be a lot more to talk about there. It would take us a long time to do that. And so I think as a very focused case study, Lydia is more interesting than Elizabeth, just because it's very specific. Because in particular, she plays a very particular role in this story. She is, on the one hand, a kind of a foil for Elizabeth in some ways, but she is she is a character who is going to act in particular ways and make particular choices. And so everyone, Jane Austen in writing the novel, and the filmmakers in designing their films, all of them have to prepare us for how we're going to receive Lydia, right? How is the story of Lydia being set up? And how is it being connected with the main story? So
I think we should also acknowledge the reason that Lydia was also so interesting for this was the way she was portrayed differently in these two adaptations. So like, it's not just what Lydia is in the text and why that's an important character. It's also the decisions made by these two creators about the original and how they differ, that we found that change really interesting. And let's talk about that.
Yeah.
I kind of like going the backwards direction too, of like, we're interested in this because of the changes.
Yep. Yes, exactly. Because it is an interesting challenge. I mean, when you have, especially given the time, how Lydia's story is, okay, no, more broadly, how any minor character or sort of subplot of a novel is worked into a film adaptation is always an interesting question, right? There's a lot of pressure on that. In a sense, there's more pressure on that than there is on the pressure of the protagonist, right? There are going to be things that you're going to have to really compress about Elizabeth Bennet's story, right? You're not going to be able to include every scene and everything that happens to Elizabeth Bennet. But like, obviously, if you're going to tell the story of Pride and Prejudice, most likely you're going to be prioritizing the major arc of Lizzie's character. That is kind of a given, usually, generally, going to be a given of this kind of an adaptation. But there can be lots of differences in how you handle the minor characters and the lesser subplots. Lydia is one that I've never seen a Pride and Prejudice adaptation that just cuts Lydia. Like, that's a storyline that's it's a subplot, but it's a crucial subplot to the overall story. And so everybody chooses to do so the responsibility to do something with this character and this storyline is pretty clear on everybody. And so it gives us a chance to see, like, so what do they do? How do they do it? Right? How do they figure this out? How do they approach this question? And when we look back at how Austen did it herself, it is amazing how little she does. Like, the more I do analysis of Austen, the more closely I look at Austen, the more impressed I am at how little she says about almost anything. It's amazing. It's really amazing what she does.
And part of me thinks that's probably why it's so apt for adaptation, because there's so much beautiful stuff to read between the lines and interpret.
Yes. And it's one of the things, I mean, it is a thing that you tend to see a lot of in adaptations of Jane Austen. That is the spelling out of things that are unspoken in the original text, right? And sometimes that happens because of the culture changes. Like, Jane Austen didn't have to say certain things because everybody knew them. And she could assume that everybody was thinking similar ways. But at the same time, there are also just many things that she brings you to think and feel without telling you to do it, because she is such a brilliant writer. And so that combination of things, I I mean, I know it's one of the, I mean, I know I always am talking about my wife and her reactions. She is like, my wife is the primary Jane Austen reader in my life. So it's why I always kind of think of her as an example. But it's one of the things that will often kind of make her roll her eyes a little bit when we get to like those scenes in modern adaptations where they're like laboriously doing exposition of things that don't have to be said in Jane
Yeah.
Austen. Um, but anyway, but that's not the only approach, and it's certainly not that all adaptations do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and yes, David Roberts, I agree with you that one of the another thing that makes Lydia an interesting example is, as David Roberts says on YouTube, he says another aspect of the challenge is the fact that her transgression in the text is very culturally rooted in the period, and audiences today might not blink at her elopement.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And about like the ways, like the cultural norms that Lydia is breaking almost every time she opens her mouth are going to
Yeah.
go over the head of a lot of people who, if you're reading Jane Austen for the first time and you've never read any 19th century literature at all, and it's totally alien to you, you might not realize why people are shocked at things that Lydia says.
Yeah, and starting with some of the things that she says, I mean, those are like pretty minor transgressions when you think about it, right? Like she's just stepping out of turn, but like at the time that would have been absolutely shocking, let alone the running out in the middle of the night with a single dude and like eloping. Like what? Like
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
that would have been like burn the house down shocking.
Yeah. I mean, this is why they're like already, I mean, they don't quite, erect the tombstone for Lydia, but like
Yeah,
it's like one
not
step
far
shy of
off.
that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And the
So
whole family is going to, anyway, we'll get there, but like the whole family going into ruin as well. Like
yeah,
she will drag them all down with
yes,
her transgression.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
exactly. And so I mean, we're not, so that's not going to be our focus. It's going to be her introduction. But yes, but that's Lydia is a really good example of one of the places in the text where the difference in cultural norms between the early 19th century, the late 17th century, or sorry, the late 18th century, I mean, and and okay, sorry, let me just say the late 1700s is what I'm talking about. That's the cultural moment. The book is published in 1813, but the sensibilities of it, the society that it is depicting, is basically the culture of the. People think of, Americans especially will tend to lump Jane Austen in with like 19th century or Victorian literature or something. It's a different culture from Victorian literature. It's significantly earlier than like the Brontes or something like that. She's decades and decades before they are. Anyway, okay, so let's look at the first references to Lydia in the text and see what we want to emphasize, not only about what she does, Austen, but how she does it. So, like a
So we're
really
establishing who Lydia is,
right,
how we're introduced to her. So when we look at how the adapters look at it, we can recognize kind of the techniques, but also the meaning inferred from those techniques.
right. So chapter one, chapters are quite short in Pride and Prejudice. In chapter one, we don't get anything about Lydia. This is, of course, it begins with the famous conversation between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet about the rich single young man moving in right nearby in Netherfield, right? And so we do learn about like the desire that we learn that they have multiple daughters, right? When a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, so we learn that she has 5 grown-up daughters, none of whom are married, right? So we haven't yet learned anything about Lydia specifically, but we know that particular situation. Now you guys may remember from our earlier discussions, my blue highlighting here is for the sections I was highlighting to talk about the relationship between Lizzie and her father. But here we do get, see, I was already wrong. We get our first reference to Lydia in chapter 1 here. Mrs. Bennet mentions her. When Mr. Bennet says, "I dare say Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you. He's teasing them about how they don't need to go through the process of formal introduction, right? Notice that by itself, the cultural taboo about approaching somebody to meet them and have conversation with them before a formal introduction has been made, like without a formal introduction. That's one of the very first things that we get in the book, right? And is yet another thing. The idea of like, there's a stranger in the room, but it's not okay to go up and say hi to them. Like, right. If you've not been introduced to them, is weird from the point of view of our culture. But
I hadn't really thought about that, but thinking about the Joe Wright film when Mr. Collins goes up to Mr. Darcy,
yes,
and she to explain to us that would be an impertinence.
Yes.
Like, so the audience understands that this would not be acceptable.
Yes, that's the moment where the introduction thing really kind of comes to crisis in Pride and Prejudice when Mr. Collins But yes, even like helping modern audiences to understand what kind of a faux pas Mr. Collins is making there, what a fool he's making of himself in that moment, is counterintuitive if you don't understand the culture. And in our very first chapter, we have one of these cultural norms being acknowledged, the need to be introduced. And the whole point of the conversation between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet is that Mr. Bennet has an excuse to introduce himself to him. Normally you don't go up and introduce yourself, but when a new person moves into your neighborhood, then you, as the man of the house, have the excuse to go up. Like that is a social excuse. That's an open door to go and and if you do that, then the rest of your family can meet him too. Right? You can invite him over to your house. He could invite you over to his house. But those things can't happen until the person who already lived there goes over to meet. The person who's moving into the neighborhood isn't supposed to come over and knock on your door. That would be rude, right? Yeah. But you, the residents of the neighborhood, are supposed to go visit
their door with a casserole and introduces yourself as the friendly neighbor.
Right. Not quite with the casserole, but yes.
That's our modern contextualizing of it.
Exactly. So this is the whole like drama of the conversation, is that Mrs. Bennet is saying, you better go meet him right away so that we can and she's thinking in this entirely mercantile ways, right? Like, you know, I'm hoping we can marry him off to one of our daughters, and I'm wanting to shop our daughters in front of him, but I can't do that until you go meet him. So, and he's teasing her. Like, oh no, I see. So when he says you're over scrupulous, surely, like, oh no, like there's no, you know, you can. I dare say Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you, and I will send a few lines by you to assure him of my hearty consent to his marrying whichever he chooses of the girls. And so, I don't want to get too sidetracked here. I'm tempted to get sidetracked, but I won't get too sidetracked. The subtlety of Mr. Bingley's humor and the way in which he's playing with these cultural norms he is teasing Mrs. Bennet on like multiple levels here, but I'm not even going to go there.
But it's nice to acknowledge that, because that is something we see in all the adaptations of just how they play with that humor in their relationship. So like acknowledged. Yep.
Yes.
But Lydia.
Right. And then he ends his speech by saying, though I must throw in a good word for my little Lizzie. At which point, Mrs. Bennet responds and says, I desire you will do no such thing. Lizzie is not a bit better than the others, and I am sure she is not half so handsome as Jane, nor half so good-humored as Lydia. But you are always giving her the preference. So Lydia is first named by Mrs. Bennet and called out for special commendation. In Mrs. Bennet's mind, the two daughters that she mentions, Mr. Bennet mentions Elizabeth as his, like, the particular one that he would emphasize. Mm-hmm. Mrs. Bennet emphasizes Jane as the most beautiful, the most handsome, and Lydia as the most good-humored. So, like, it seems that in her mind, she has Jane and Lydia number 1 and number 2 in her own preference, like what she values. We have not yet learned that Lydia is daughter number 5. We don't know that for sure. We're told nothing about the sequence yet. So Lydia, we are told, is, according to Mrs. Bennet, the most good-humored of the daughters. It's also perfectly clear from the context that we've received that Mrs. Bennet's primary concern is getting them married. So it seems to me a very logical leap to imagine that Mrs. Bennet's commendation is based primarily on marriageability. Like,
Right. The
men,
factors that will get them. And
yes, men are most likely to admire Jane's looks, and they're most likely to think Lydia is a lot of fun, right?
right.
So those are the two that she thinks like most likely to find husbands. It seems like that seems to me the implication of Mrs. Bennet's
Evaluation
speech
scale. Yeah.
evaluation there. So Lydia is like Miss Congeniality of like the Bennett family according to Mrs. Bennett, for what that might be worth. And that's all we get in chapter 1. In chapter 2, the narrator tells us immediately that Mr. Bennett did, of course, immediately go over and wait on Mr. Bingley. Like, that is to say, he went over and visited him like he was supposed to do. In fact, like before many of his neighbors. So for all that he was joking about it, like he totally did it. And now he's continuing to tease them. Chapter 2 is his reveal of this fact, right?
Yeah.
To his wife and daughters. And Lydia speaks for the first time. So this is our first actual introduction to Lydia's character. And it comes at the end. It's mentioned that the next ball is tomorrow fortnight. And then he kind of springs it on them. That he's visited Mr. Bingley, and that they as a family are now officially acquainted. That's an important word, acquainted with Mr. Bingley, and so therefore it's like open season for the daughters to meet him, right? And they're all astonished, and Mrs. Bennet, speaks in great praise. I am sure you loved your girls too well to neglect such an acquaintance. Well, how pleased I am, and it's such a good joke too. And then Mr. Bennet leaves. Here comes Lydia. Mrs. Bennet says, "What an excellent father you have, girls," said she, when the door was shut. "I do not know how you will ever make him amends for his kindness, or me either, for that matter. At our time of life it is not so pleasant, I can tell you, to be making new acquaintances every day, but for your sakes we would do anything. Lydia, my love, though you are the youngest, I dare say Mr. Bingley will dance with you at the next ball." So our second reference to Lydia is a confirmation that she is the youngest of the 5. And the fact that she here is singled out again by Mrs. Bennet, right?
And she's the first one singled out.
The first one singled out.
Jane's not even mentioned.
Yeah. Lydia, my love, though you are the youngest, I dare say Mr. Bingley will dance with you at the next ball. So she wants to reassure Lydia, right? She's going out of her way to make sure that Lydia knows that she's not going to be left out. Doesn't have to worry about being left out. She too will get to dance with Mr. Bingley at the next ball.
Yeah.
"Oh," said Lydia stoutly, "I am not afraid, for though I am the youngest, I'm the tallest."
Like, that's her response. I love it.
Yeah. And so the emphasis, the key word, and I remember when we discussed this before, the key word to me is stoutly. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The stoutness of Lydia is what Austen emphasizes. So the very first thing we get is her mother's partiality to her, and her mother's praise that she is the most good-humored of all 5 of her daughters. The second thing that Austen emphasizes about Lydia is the stoutness and forthrightness of her character. Having just been reassured that she's not going to be neglected at the ball, and therefore she shouldn't be afraid, she says, "I'm not afraid," very stoutly. Lydia, the last thing Lydia is worried about is being left out of things. She is going to see to it that she is not going to be left out. And Lydia's mother has a very high opinion of her, and Lydia clearly has a very high opinion of herself. Though I am the youngest, I am the tallest. And again, when we talked about this before, the thing I would want to emphasize here again in our analysis is that she points to something objective, right? She doesn't just make a claim like, though I am the youngest, like I'm the most fun. Like she might have said that, right? Though I am the youngest, all the men will want to dance with me, not you, she might have said, right? But that's not what she says. She says something which nobody can argue with. She's the tallest, right?
Although I'm the youngest, I'm tall.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Though I'm the youngest,
Yeah.
I'm tallest. I'm big, she's saying. I mean, there's something childlike about it as well,
Yeah.
something childish about it. Like, I'm a big girl now, is on the one hand what she seems to be saying. So we can see a maturity there. Like, seriously, you're measuring your worth by how tall you are? Or what she
Yeah.
said, but though what she's saying, I mean, height was important, like the societal concept of a beautiful woman was tall then. Like if you were very short, that would have been considered a blemish. We can see many examples in Austen's novels of that being mentioned as a downside. But so yes, Phil, being tall was considered an advantage. So it's a kind of snarky way to say, like, I measure up to all of you sisters, right? Like I'm not less than any of you. Yeah, so she's saying that in a literal way and implying it in a more than simply literal way, right? I'm as good as any of you. I'm as desirable as any of you. I am not afraid, right? Lydia throwing herself out there, right? Being unafraid of, again, far from feeling that she's going to be left out. She is like determined to get her own, right? And putting herself out there in open competition with her sisters. And her boldness. The word stout is not negative, right? Like, Austen has not criticized Lydia. Austen has not, but see, that's the thing. Austen almost never criticizes anybody. Like she almost, this is something, anyone who's ever tried to write an English paper on Jane Austen might have had this experience if you're at all careful while doing it. Like when you're doing analysis of Austen and you're like, well, Austen says this, right? She tells us this about this character. And then you go to try to find a quote that proves it. It's really hard. Like it's hard to nail her down. You can find lots of things which suggest it, right? Which kind of point you in that general direction. But it's difficult. So like for instance,
But that's what's so fun. She paints such a robust picture.
Yeah, it's what makes her so good. Going back to just a couple paragraphs before, David Roberts was pointing to this line, which is, of course, a wonderful Austen line. Now, Kitty, you may cough as much as you choose, said Mr. Bennet, and as he spoke, he left the room, fatigued with the raptures of his wife. Right? So, I think you can conclude in these first two chapters that Mr. Bennet has a very low opinion of his wife's intelligence. But it's not easy to prove it. Again, you can show it. I don't think it's wrong, but when you if you quoted that he's fatigued with the raptures of his wife, it doesn't prove that you know what I mean? Again, it's yet another example of how it is difficult. What does that exactly show? That he's fatigued with the raptures of his wife. Is it telling us something about him, or is it telling us something about her, his view of her? Yes, it is. Like, we all get it, I think, but again, it's really hard to nail down. This is the thing, as you say, Maggie, it's the thing that makes Austen, I think, so irresistible for adapters, right? Is that to try to capture what she is so good at evoking these ideas in your own head as you're reading. And so trying to capture that,
And there's a lot to
show
play
that.
with. I mean, and we'll see this with the two examples we're about to do with the BBC and the Joe Wright, but like you can see in these tiny little nuggets of Lydia what these actresses get to do with that character.
Yes.
And how that character is taken in such strong vivacious directions,
Yes.
but very different too. Like the introductions we have to the two Lydias in the the visual adaptations are very different.
Yes. Yes. Um, yes, absolutely. Um, yeah, it's
So our main sum up for novel, our introduction, most good humored. Jane and Lydia are at the top. I'm trying to distill down to like what are our bits that we want to highlight to make sure this is clear
yeah.
and
Um,
engaging.
the boldness of her character, like the
Boldness
forthrightness
of
of her
character.
character, um, how she is unintimidated and relatively uninhibited, and how she is sees herself in competition with her older sisters
Hmm.
favorably. Like she thinks um, she thinks she stacks up pretty favorably to her older sisters.
And I think how she's introduced as part of the family unit too, just seeing the treatment of the mother to Lydia as being top tier.
Hmm.
It's quite telling that the youngest is first or second choice for her.
Yeah, we again, it's not stated. This again would be like it's another example, right? Like the premise, Lydia is the favorite of her mother. We have some good evidence for that in these first two
Hmm.
chapters, but it would be hard to prove it based on
Yeah.
these first two chapters. Um, uh, but anyway, okay, yes, I agree. Those things are kind of where we start from the book. Now let's think about let's shall we start with the BBC film?
Yes. Let me get up to that
Okay.
scene.
So the BBC film, we will recall that both films actually start with Elizabeth on her own,
Yes.
right? And our first introduction to Lydia comes at about was it about I got
Two and a
two,
half.
yeah, 2.5 minutes, and I'm like a 2:25 or so. This
Yeah.
is as Elizabeth is approaching the house from the outside, and she looks like she's approaching the front door. But before she gets to the front door, we hear the voices in the
Yep.
background. We can hear Kitty and Lydia's voices arguing. Because Lydia has stolen Kitty's bonnet, isn't it? I think it's her bonnet
Yeah.
that she's stolen. Um, and
And we have that great exchange between Lizzie and her dad through the window,
the
rolling
whole
their eyes.
the whole time that this is going on,
Not
and of course,
person.
like the mere so even before we truly understand what's going on there, right? The fact that the two shrill quarreling voices of Kitty and Lydia is reaching like into the
Outside.
driveway
Yeah.
outside, right, is our first indication, right?
And that no one is ruffled by this.
Yes.
Like, yeah, we're hearing it outside in the driveway and they roll their eyes. Like, again, like,
Yes.
no
So
one's up in arms. No one is worried.
right, this is not like when you approach the house and you hear like shrieking and yelling, there is no alarm. Like
No.
Lizzie does not suspect that something horrible is going on and run in to find out what's wrong. It's just a normal day, and that's
In,
confirmed with the eye roll between her and her dad.
yeah, in fact, she doesn't go in. She
Right.
diverts her
She
direction
diverts and goes
to
around
make
the
eye
house.
contact
Yeah.
with her dad through the window.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. While both of them are in their own places of safety, right? Her
Yes.
outside walking, him in his library, where neither one of them has to actually confront the situation, right? Um, so, yeah, so the eye rolling tells us that this happens all the time. So, what have we learned about Lydia already? Even without thinking of the content of her lines, we know that she is routinely
Dramatic.
and loudly quarrelsome, right,
Hmm.
with her sister. That this, and I say routinely, like this happens all the time. This is like a daily occurrence.
And like causes a ruckus without cause, Like
Yeah,
And the little chuckle that they share, you can just tell that they're making light of it. Like, who knows? Them again.
Them again. Exactly. Exactly. And the shouting of Kitty and Lydia
Mhm.
contrasted with the, of course we have like the gentle bucolic music that's been playing, right? It's a very calming scene. Her of
Very
Elizabeth walking
calm.
down the road to the house and seeing the house, and her pace and her demeanor,
Mhm.
and like everything about it is calm and quiet, and in stark contrast with what like everything we're seeing is still calm, right? But
Yeah.
what we hear is this
And
outrage.
we hear the battle between the two sisters, so like it's pretty easy to think that, well, Kitty's partially to blame too, and I'm sure she probably is. It's sisterly quarrelsomeness, but the next shot is Lydia being the cause of all of the concern. So she is the one that utterly breaks this peace that we have been introduced to through the course of the first 3 minutes of the film. And 3 minutes doesn't sound like that long, but 3 minutes staring at one scene without dialogue is a fairly long time. We're
Yeah.
watching this beautiful pastoral countryside, baby animals, new starts, fresh day, clean slate, and then so it
Yes.
does kind of break through all of that, and she is the cause of the frustration. So that's an immediate jar, and not as in like I'm turned off from this, but it's a beat. So like it's a beat in the storyline to be like, we are disrupted.
Yes.
What is the cause of my disruption? It's her.
Yes. The cut, which is at like 240 or something. I'm looking at the version on Amazon Prime. Um, the cut from Lizzie and Mr. Bennett rolling their eyes and smiling to each other, and then Lydia, and then Lizzie turns away, and then we immediately cut to Lydia and Kitty in frantic motion, right? And we're seeing Lydia holding the bonnet, the disputed bonnet, and Kitty trying to physically grab it out of her hands, and her waving it away and running like they're behaving like 5 year olds,
Yeah.
the two of them, right? In the way that they are running around. And then Lydia, also like a 5 year old, immediately runs over to the other side of her mother's chair with her right hand on the chair as if it's home base, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't catch me here. Um, and Kitty's petulant expression, like both of them look, again, they look five. Now, this is really interesting because on the one hand, this is in stark contrast to Lydia's introduction in the text, right?
Yeah.
Lydia's introduction in the text is about her bragging about her desirability to men in being tall and in competing with her sisters for the attention of men, right? And her confidence that she will be able to gain the attention of men at the ball, even men who might potentially be interested in her sister. Like, she doesn't exactly say, like, I bet Mr. Bingley falls in love with me instead of you, right?
Yeah.
But, like, that she's going to have a go is kind of there, right?
Yeah.
Implicit in the text. So, forthright, we get bold, we get in the text. But, like, if anything, more mature, like ahead of the curve when it comes to maturity in a sense, like, or at least she thinks of herself in that way. Um,
Yeah, she thinks of herself in that way, and I think that's probably where context could come into play, that we don't have the nuance of the original time period to kind of read between those lines, I guess.
yeah,
So we need to be a little bit more explicit
yeah,
with immaturity. And I paused it at 2:57, so I'm not sure if yours is the same, but like the second Lydia grabs the bonnet and Kitty runs away, Lydia gets this
yes,
little sister look that if you have a little sister, I am the little sister, so it was my face that had this look. But like if you had a little sister, you know this look where it's like, I got my way. And it just reads so strongly that in that hot second where you see her switch from like defensive attack to smug, I have won, that's where I think you see that boldness, where she's like, I was pestering, but look, I'm perfect. And it reads so well.
yes, yes. And then the immediate turning to the mirror, right, to put the
Hmm.
bonnet on and admire herself in the mirror, right? So,
And even the way she spins. It's just like,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
She sort of whirls. She whirls. She's got her hair kind of tied up and she sort of whirls her hair and her dress
Mhm.
around as she whisks about to the mirror. Um,
And I wish she could be a fly on the wall of like what the conversations were there, but like what we're seeing from the novel is boldness, confidence, assurance, and immaturity because she's using this inarguable fact of being tall. Like that does kind of smack of like, okay, childish response, but sure.
right.
And we just get that in a different way with this one.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yes. Like I do think even the adjective stoutly, right? Like
Hmm.
rarely would a mature woman be described as doing something stoutly. I think like that's
Mm,
a child would like you might would say that of a child. Um, when a child speaks boldly in front of adults, they might say something or might answer stoutly, and there might be a fine line between stoutness and impertinence in that kind of a situation. Um, but but yes, the film adaptation, the BBC adaptation, is very strongly emphasizes her childishness and immaturity. Like the first impression we get of her is well, okay. The first impression we get of her is loud, right, and selfish. Um, we don't exactly know, but I see no reason based on what we see here to disbelieve Kitty's accusation. I'm sure it was Kitty's bonnet, which
oh, totally.
Lydia took for herself. So, like the overt selfishness and lack of consideration for her sister, of which Lydia appears to be guilty. And again, note, there's nothing of selfishness from Lydia that we get in the text, right? We're
Yeah.
maybe a little hint like her stoutness of speech and her comparison, I'm taller than my sisters, might be a little bit immature, right? But we certainly don't get childishness from her exactly, other than the faint hint of like, I'm all grown up, um, you know,
Yeah.
about it. But still, nothing like you know, I'm stealing your hat and then I'm going to run around the room while you try to grab it back. And
Well, and I was thinking like with that specific example of like stealing a hat and running around the room, that could just as easily be a 4 and a 5-year-old and read exactly the same.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's small child behavior and that's what we understand. Immature, loud, decorum is out the window.
yes,
All of those things that you would expect to see in this household not being represented.
yeah.
We don't get that in the text.
And it's
So it's
such a contrast between the calm stateliness of Elizabeth in her walk and her facial expressions with her father, right? Even the kind of like the eye roll that the two of them exchange.
Mhm.
Her eye roll is very subtle and her smile is very gentle, right? It's a huge contrast. Um, so we're being asked to view Lydia. I think we're being asked by this film to be primarily view Lydia as immature, as childish.
Yes.
Um, we don't really get any of the element of like, um, like sexual competition, right? Like, to compete with her sisters for men. Like there's or interest in men. Like we don't even get that. Whereas again, that's a subtext in the text with about her dancing with somebody at a ball, right?
Yeah, I do wonder how much of it is actually about getting with a person at the ball. I don't think she cares about the getting with the person part. It's the I want to win because
I want to be
uh,
admired. Yeah.
well, and like I'm the youngest child. I think there's a little bit of like well, I'm still important. Like proving herself, like standing out from the sisters. It's it feels more about her relationship within the family than it does about connecting with
Hmm.
somebody outside of the family.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I agree. I don't get the impression from her first line there in the text that she is like angling for Mr. Darcy or
No, I
for
don't
Mr.
think she actually
Bingley.
cares.
Yeah.
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 She wants to win because she cares about beating her
Right.
sisters.
Right.
I don't think she actually cares about getting a husband.
Yeah. It's
She's like,
primarily
kind of,
responding to the "I'm sure you won't be left out" concept,
yeah,
right? That
yeah.
Mrs. Bennet is bringing up with her.
And even that is a pretty subtle difference from what we see in the BBC version of like, I don't want to be left out. I'm, the youngest of these sisters, but that's a very different vibe than we get than the petulant. I was going to say a bad word. The petulant child that's
Right.
throwing her toys out of the pram.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, yeah. So bad behavior to her sister, indecorous behavior, like remarkably indecorous behavior for anything close to a mature person.
Hmm.
Certainly, again, we don't need to be very thoroughly embedded in 18th or 19th century values to understand that Lydia is acting in an unladylike way, right? Like
Hmm.
this is not behavior that is likely to, make people respect you as a grown
Yeah.
woman or a potential marriage partner or anything like that. Okay, so let's
We're gonna have to stop there.
we're gonna have to
'Cause
stop there. Let's
I
not.
know I have another meeting in 2 minutes,
We
which
do.
is such a tease.
We do.
And
Okay.
it's gonna be 2 weeks until we can look at the Netflix one, but I like the rhythm of where we are. So like the sum up,
Oh, the Netflix one, which isn't on Netflix anymore.
which isn't on Netflix anymore. Well,
Right.
it is on mine, but it's not on yours.
It's not on
The
mine.
Joe Wright one.
No,
The
the Joe Wright
Keira
film.
Knightley one.
Yes, which has been like its license has shifted since the last time we
Yes.
looked at it. I had to find it. I had to buy it on Prime before I could get it again.
Well, at least you know you have it now,
At
so
least I
that's
have it
something.
now. Yeah, there we go.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good though. I mean, like so far it's just like super clear examples of like we have this text that leaves a lot to be interpreted. So here's one interpretation that makes total sense of her looking younger and petulant and indecorous.
Hmm.
And then we're gonna look at this other one and how that kind of it almost echoes the BBC one, but you can see more, I
Different
don't know.
things that they're picking up on. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, yes, the
Fun.
the ways in which yes, the things that, and just thinking very very briefly because I know you're leaving, but just thinking of how the BBC is anticipating, right, what it's
Hmm.
setting us up for with Lydia
Hmm.
by having our first impression of her be petulant, troublemaking child. This primes us to view decisions she's going to make later. Like we're prepared by default to assume that Lydia is going to be making bad choices, that she's
Yeah.
going to be making selfish choices, that she is going to be making immature and ill thought through choices, right? That she
And
is,
she's gonna disrupt what we
and
like.
that she's going to
She's
be
gonna
disruptive.
disrupt the
Yes,
norm. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
those are all really interesting and relevant things. So again, like you can look at these two against each other and say, "Oh, they're doing something very different with Lydia's character," and they are, right? But you can think, especially when we think about where it's headed, you can begin to see,
Yeah.
like, actually, yeah, this is a way to tell that story to prepare us as viewers who are only going to get how many total minutes with Lydia before the big crisis occurs, right? And
Right.
how are they going to use the time that they have to prepare
Yeah.
us for where we need to be in that moment?
So changing the line from I'm tall
Right.
to I'm a pain in the butt and I stole your hat. Eh. Like you can see how that
Yeah.
facilitates the action that we need to land later.
Yeah.
Better than I'm tall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shouldn't
It,
say better. We're not going to use those terms,
yeah.
but
It's a huge change, but it works. You can see why what they feel that they had to convey, what like the frame of mind they wanted to put us in about Lydia from the beginning, so that we're ready for what comes later. All right,
exactly.
I'll let you go. Let everybody go. We shall return. Sadly, we shan't return for another fortnight. But when we return, we'll look at the Joe Wright film first, and then we'll finish our planning and maybe take a crack at
How
some
much did
recording.
I love that sentence? We shan't return for another
We
fortnight.
shan't
Well
return
done,
for
Dr.
another
Corey
fortnight.
Olsen. We shan't return for another fortnight. However, anon. We'll see you in 2 weeks when we will talk about the Keira Knightley bit. We'll probably also have a few other things scheduled out by then,
Yes.
so we'll keep you
Yes,
posted.
I think so.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, gang.
Bye.
See ya.